No, those things will kill you.
Yeah, so will a 100-foot crocodile.
For a studio that would one day become as well known for their creature features as their mockbusters, and in some cases possibly more so, the Asylum was surprisingly sparse with their monster movies in their early years. In their first decade of operation, the studio produced only 2 movies with a non-sapient, extremely aggressive beast as its antagonist. The Beast of Bray Road, which we already covered, and today's feature, Supercroc. Though I guess if you really stretch the definition, we could add Shapeshifter, Snakes on a Train, and Dragon to the list, but I digress. Despite me saying this is not a mockbuster at the end of the previous video, IMDb suggests that the movie was made to capitalize on the other killer crocodile movie released that year, Primeval. I find that suspect. Sure, the Asylum doesn't always choose critical or commercial darlings to piggyback off of, but to rip off a movie that's been around for almost 3 months by this point, that was universally panned by critics in the box office, and has become so forgotten 99% of you have probably never even heard of it until I brought it up? Yeah, citation needed. And with that, I've said everything I can say about the movie at this point, so let's dip our toes in the water and see why the studio ultimately decided to ditch crocodiles in favor of sharks. On the eastern coast of the US, suspicious seismic scans start to spread. Assuming they're left by a life form, a special ops force sends a minor military team to check it out. While it initially appears to be nothing, the squad is soon decimated by a despicable reptile, who then proceeds to demolish California. Immensely impervious to all immediate weaponry, the carnivorous crocodile wastes no time in wasting whoever and whatever in its path. And to make matters worse, it's discovered to have laid a large clutch of eggs, each one potentially hatching another cantankerous creature from the Cretaceous. Will somebody stop this ravenous reptile before it wolfs down West Hollywood? Are these awkward alliterations annoying already? Well, I gotta give them this. It's pretty ballsy to make a movie without a first act. Yeah, when the movie starts, we're right in the middle of the action, as we join the search already in progress for the source of the shakiness. Who are these people? What agency sent them? How were they alerted to the problem in its location? All these questions and more are kind of answered later, but it's obvious that the movie doesn't care for details. No, it's one of those movies, where they have so little respect for their audience, they forego any build-up or suspense and just get to the monster attacking. And not in the traditional opening kill way, where the group we're following are all massacred by the monster, then we're introduced to our actual main characters. No, most of the characters we're introduced to are whom we're going to be following throughout the movie. I guess it's better than the trope of showing the ending, then cutting to the events leading up to it. Because unless you're Pink Floyd's The Wall, don't even try that. Okay, fine, so we get the big monster reveal and escalation within the first 10 minutes. That means the rest of the movie will be non-stop action, with the military desperately trying to keep the creature from destroying everything, and a sense of tension if they can keep it away from the areas that will suffer the most damage. Including nail-biting scenes where it's left up in the air if their latest plan will finish off the monster, or just make it angrier. Well, if you believe that, hey, welcome to this retrospective. You've clearly never seen an Asylum movie, and this is the first review you've clicked on. Yeah, we might as well get to the worst, okay, second worst, we'll get back to that, aspect of this movie. The monster. Now, the model itself is okay, nothing to write home about, but a decently built and textured render that, for all intents and purposes, moves around like a giant crocodile probably would. This is more model work from Scott Harper, whom, as we've seen from his work in Dragon, is capable of creating and smoothly animating giant creatures with a variety of movements. And, for the time, and the ridiculously small window his team was given to complete these renders, it's impressive how good they look. I'll even say that the compositing is much better in this movie, as they did put in the effort to have the crocodile pass behind things, and it's less obvious the actors are standing in front of a flat green screen. As opposed to Dragon, where almost every shot of the model was clumsily layered on top of the footage, and the green screen was on the same level as a Grindhouse Kids movie from the 70s. So, in terms of lower tier CGI and Asylum movies of the time, this is surprisingly some of their best. But therein lies the problem. It's a computer-generated monster. Now, I'm no animator, but I know that designing, animating, and rendering CGI is a tremendous amount of work, especially if you're trying to sync it up with live footage. Heck, even multi-million-dollar mainstream movies can struggle with convincingly integrating computer animation with live action. And when you have less than $1 million and no more than a month to make the same kind of movie, well, it's gonna look awful. Worse than if it was a two-dimensional drawing, because that at least has a surreal quality going for it. And while I could previously look past most of the Asylum's worst effects, this is an instance where I can't forgive them. Because here, it's the main focus. With movies like Dragon or King of the Lost World, yes, the integration was awful, but you can make the argument the spotlight wasn't on the creatures. It was about the journey, a motley group of characters braving an unknown world and the perils within. The creatures they encountered were just an afterthought. Here, it's a monster movie. The focus is on the monster. And for most of the movie, there's no monster. Oh sure, we'll get the occasional scene of the giant croc lumbering around, sometimes snapping at the soldiers and supposedly eating them. And if we're lucky, maybe we'll get a shot of the croc actually attacking something. But for most of the runtime, it's just the characters reacting to nothing. Screaming and shooting at nothing. Like this is a cheap monster movie from the 1950s, where the monsters are just insert shots of everyday creatures placed in miniature models to make them look giant. Which, if this movie was made back then, would still mean it would suck, as seen by how many of those movies ended up on MST3K. You know what made the Beast of Bray Road work? They actually had a monster, a live performer in a beast costume that terrorized the other actors and gave them something to work off of. Something that they had on hand to use for any scene that could give a unique reaction to the situation and actually interact with the human characters. It doesn't matter how convincing it looked or how realistic the kill shots were, it was there. It was actually happening, and I could believe it was actually happening. A trait that even Shapeshifter possessed. Heck, as much as I hated Monster High, I did give praise to the monsters and kill shots because they were solid. They had a presence in the movie that the other characters could react to, and vice versa. At no point was I ever convinced Supercroc here was sharing the same screen space as the live actors. The model leaves no impact with its surroundings whatsoever. Not even a footprint or a blood splurt from off screen. Even Dragon had the titular creature pick up and violently shake around one of the troop like a chew toy. The best we get are scenes where the actors slightly fall over backs, where it violently knocks people over with its tail. Yeah, they're totally dead after that light push. Oh, but we do get this one shot where it leaps up and pulls a helicopter down. Which, okay, fine, I'll give them that one. But besides that, the crocodile has absolutely no presence in the movie. And if the monster doesn't have a reaction to anything going on around it, then I have no reaction to the monster. And if I don't care about the creature in a creature feature, well, the movie gives me nothing to care about. The film is a testament to why I will always champion at least partial practical effects over purely digital effects in a movie. I would literally rather watch a 5-year-old in a Yoshi costume stomp around on a village they molded out of Play-Doh over this. Because it's there. Oh, but don't worry, the movie gives us so many other things to focus on, like our lead, Private Perez, who is one of the worst characters I've ever had to endure from an Asylum movie. Given the movies we've watched up to this point, that may sound harsh, but I cannot begin to express just how insufferable this character is. I think her character is supposed to be like an 80s action hero badass who bucks authority but gets the job done, but her posture and her tone and how she delivers each line screams less mission-focused soldier and more 3-year-old acting out against her parents. Every scene, she's whining or crying or talking back to her superiors or disobeying direct orders, and all in that whiny, nasally voice that, well, sounds like a gender-swapped version of me.
Phantom 4, are you getting any of this? Over?
We're gonna have to circle back to avoid it.
You can't avoid it.
Excuse me?
You can't avoid it. With all due respect, sir, shut up.
The sergeant's hand is down by the riverbank, and for the rest of them, you're just gonna have to cut that thing open.
This is not a wedding ring. It's an engagement ring. What kind of bullet-pissing, jar-headed moron can't tell the difference between a wedding ring and an engagement ring, huh? Don't you ever let me like that again!
Quiet!
Don't you ever let me like that again!
My friends were rich. We went to parties all the time in limousines. I'm singing outside. I'm scared. I can lose my voice.
Movies do realize that soldiers are conditioned for this sort of thing, right? Recruitment offices don't just hand whoever walks into the office a gun and a uniform and immediately sends them on a mission. There's a bit of a training period where recruits spend months or even years learning how to handle these kinds of situations. training that would drastically change or outright expel a good chunk of applicants, including anyone who would act this way in the heat of battle. And it's suggested she's been in the army for quite some time, at least long enough to get engaged to another soldier in her squadron. Which, is that a thing? Can two soldiers in the same team have a relationship? I don't know. But what I do know is that I would sooner believe that there is a 50-foot long crocodile ready to destroy Los Angeles than this lady would last one day in the armed forces. If this is how she handles this hazard, I'd love to see how she reacts when she's deployed for actual armed combat.
I'd like to leave the army, please, sir.
Why?
It's dangerous. People get killed. If you're in the army and there's a war, you have to go and fight. Somebody could be hurt. So I'd like to leave, sir, before I get killed, please.
And before you say, oh, well, she just witnessed her entire squadron, including her fiancé, get killed by a giant reptile, so that's why she's acting out. Well, she was a brat before the encounter, so I don't see how her later scenes would have played out any differently. Also, that incident is mentioned once and then never again. Instead, the movie takes a cue from Demonic Toys or the Andromeda Strain miniseries and just has her go, "Wah, my new boyfriend's dead! Oh well, hey Beefcake I just met, you my new squeeze toy!" For the 5 of you who have always wondered what it'd be like to see the Kardashians join the military, well, this movie has you covered. Said Beefcake is Captain Lynch, head of another squadron sent in to rescue Perez's team. But his team is also eaten by the creature, who gobbles down the evac helicopter for dessert. And from there, Actually, I can't think of a single thing he says or does in this entire movie. I think he's just there so we don't have to solely listen to Perez every time it cuts back to them. Oh wait, he smokes. Okay, there's one thing we can say about him, because I guess Lee Scott took over directing for 20 seconds.
There's a couple trends in Lee Scott movies you'll see. I do enjoy the cigarettes, I like to smoke. I do almost always have to make it a point that one character in the film will smoke. Kind of interesting.
On the other side of things, we have the Situation Room, where important-looking people say important-sounding things. And that's all. I think their role is to update the audience on how close the crocodile is to a major populated city, but because we don't know the proximity of one area to another, and they're saving that precious CGI croc footage for insert scenes like walking down an empty street, we can't exactly follow what they're seeing. Everyone's just saying the same thing, staring intently at computer screens, half of which I'm pretty sure aren't even turned on, pretending they have a stake in all the nothing that's going on, and reacting to the fight that's not actually happening.
This is an impressive fight, though. I'm glad I'm facing towards it.
The only thing these scenes seem to accomplish is narrowing down what can kill a 50-foot long crocodile. Or rather, what can't. They shoot it, they blow it up, they try missiles, they try nerve gas, and the croc shakes it off like a leaf. At least, that's what they say happens. Since we never actually see them use these attacks against the beast, they could say they launched anything, and we just have to take their word for it. Launch missiles! No effect! Deploy poisonous gas! Gas didn't work! Drop the crate of rabbit howler monkeys! Monkeys are a no-go! Well, at least I got rid of that crate of howler monkeys. Don't remember where I got that from. Oh, and it's established early on that bullets have no effect on the crocodile whatsoever. So what do we hear throughout the movie? The only arc, I guess we would generously say, is with Kim Little's character. Actually, I'm just going to call her Dr. Kim Little. This time, playing her first villain role. I think. As shown earlier, the crocodile laid a clutch of eggs, each with the potential to hatch a giant crocodile that will put the one from Lake Placid to shame. So she sends a team to destroy most of the eggs, keeping a handful to use as bait to lure the Supercroc to an area where they can take it down. But, unbeknownst to the rest of the military, she instructs her own team to keep one of the eggs for herself. At least, I think nobody else knows about it. She's not exactly subtle about anything she's doing, and it's really hard to tell which soldiers are following which orders. I've watched this multiple times, and I still can't tell who's working for whom, and which egg is going where. All the exposition the movie spouts, and I have no idea what anyone's plan is. Only that Dr. Kim Little likes to go on long diatribes about crocodiles in ancient life, to the point you could call her Dr. Wikipedia.
Crocodiles you see today, in modern times, look the same as they did back then. And when the dinosaurs became extinct, they survived. They have been on this earth for millions of years. They're the only living species that stayed evolution because, quite frankly, they didn't need to adapt. Their ancestors were the toughest predators this earth has ever sustained. An archosaur could eat a T-Rex. Crocodiles have been on this earth since before the dinosaurs. Their armor is virtually impenetrable. A tank with an appetite.
And what nefarious plans does Dr. Kim Little have for the egg? Well, she wants to hatch it and study it so she can learn why it's so strong. I'm not seeing the problem here. She doesn't want to sell it to terrorists or use it as a weapon as revenge against humanity destroying the ecosystem. She wants to keep a life form long thought extinct and soon to be the last of its kind in a controlled environment so she can study it and improve the country's defensive capabilities. And she's not keeping this a secret. She's not part of an evil multi-billion-dollar corporation that wants to patent and profit off of genome research. She has a direct line to the president. In fact, if the president knows about this, then why are they keeping it a secret? Why doesn't the president just instruct the military guys currently trying to destroy the croc to get a few eggs and deliver them to Area 51? I don't get why we're supposed to see any of this as wrong. Heck, why are we supposed to see Dr. Kim Little as the villain? I'd be much more inclined to think that the people who placed giant crocodile eggs in the middle of a populated city were the bad guys. No, I'm not even kidding. That's what they do. All this talk about keeping the creature away from innocent people, and the showdown takes place in the middle of one of the most populated cities in the world. And if they have the eggs, which they established attract the crocodile, then why did they bring them inside the city limits? Why not lure it to the La Brea tar pits? Why not do a million other things that would result in far fewer casualties than... You know what? I'm done. I'm done thinking about anything because I'm clearly putting more thought into it than they did. I want to get it to a point sooner than this movie does, so moving on. Like I said, Kim Little is in this movie, in her first leading role since Killers 2, over 5 years prior to this. It's always a pleasure to see Kim Little show up in a movie, since she's a horribly overlooked talent who's always too good for the material she's given to work with. But that said, this is probably her weakest performance. Maybe she's been out of the limelight for too long, or maybe she couldn't make the garbage she was given to recite work, or maybe she was directed terribly and not allowed more than 1 or 2 takes to get her scenes done, or maybe a combination of all that and more. But whatever the reason, her acting here just doesn't work. Everything she says is rushed and breathless, like she's trying to recite her script before she forgets it. And most of her scenes, she just stands around, staring blankly at people and action scenes that are clearly not there. It's especially hilarious when 2 other characters start talking with her in the shot, and she's just standing there right in the center of the camera going, line, action, hello, what am I supposed to be doing here? Oh, she's still the best part of the movie. If I had to watch it again, I'd watch it just for her scenes. But, as we've seen with Lance Henriksen in The Da Vinci Treasure, even the most charismatic acting legends can look terrible when they're given no time or substance to work with. And because the movie decided she was the villain, she gets a death scene. Not that we see her getting killed, but something happened there. Besides Kim Little, we have Cynthia Rose Hall as Private Perez. And when I first heard that name, I embarrassingly mixed her up with Cynthia Rothrock, and now I want to see a movie where she defeats a giant crocodile by roundhouse kicking it into oblivion. No, this actress has been in... stuff. Usually as a guard or part of the armed forces, so I hope she eventually got to portray a soldier better than the one she portrays here. Matt Blaishaw has been in a couple of things, including the previous featured Freak Show. That's all I got for him. David Novak has had a career spanning almost 3 decades, mostly playing detectives, senators, generals, doctors, and other important sounding positions. And he's still going, including making his writing debut with the upcoming western Among the Willows, and he also produced and stars in. So, watch for that. Kristen Quintrall has served as editor for multiple Lee Scott films, and she makes her screen debut here, later also featuring in the occasional Asylum and Lee Scott movie. She also served as production coordinator for On the Rocks and Killer Kids, and produced the show Kart Racer, but she seems to have dropped off the map since 2015. Hey, here's me wishing her all the best with whatever she's doing now. Marat Glazer we've seen before, Shaylee Scott we've seen before, Noel Thurman we've seen before, Stephen Glynn we've seen before, and Michael Tower we've seen before. And the rest of the cast went on to mostly nothing else. The most prolific new face in this movie is probably Eric Spuddick as Private Forney. He's made a career out of mostly low-budget horror, including writing and producing his own movies, and he's made small appearances in several Asylum movies. But be sure to check him out in Zombie Pirates and Night of the Bastard. I haven't seen them, I just like the titles. And writing duties were handled by the team of David Michael Latt, who unsurprisingly also edited this movie, and Steve Bevilacqua. I wanted to point that name out because he's also the writer of Hillside Cannibals and When a Killer Calls, two of the more standout and well-produced titles in the Asylum's catalog. But they're also the Asylum's quietest movies. There, the dialogue is kept to a minimum, most of the story and atmosphere conveyed through camera work and the silent actions of the actors. And this is a movie where nobody shuts up, yet nobody has anything to say. I don't know, maybe he's better at writing more atmospheric movies, but he needed the work. Or maybe the tedious dialogue is from David Michael Latt's portion. Or maybe they decided to go a different direction with those earlier movies and cut most of the dialogue out of the scripts. But here's what happens when the writer behind two of the Asylum's slowest yet best shot horror movies pens a fast-paced creature feature. And he has a couple more Asylum movies to his name, so let's hope they represent his writing better than this one did. And that Celebrity Fit Club was a better use of his talents than this. But if the plot is impossible to follow, the on-screen action is even more so. This is some of the worst camera work I've seen in a while. Not quite the 9/11 Commission Report bad, but definitely a low point after the recent string of movies we've seen with good to fantastic cinematography. Stephen Parker is once again director of photography, and this is a guy who usually gives 100% to the movies he's worked on. Again, ignoring the 9/11 movie. And yeah, at points I can tell he's trying to be professional. We get some impressive overhead shots at the beginning. Sometimes everyone's in frame. A couple of the shots they used to insert the crocodile into are pretty impressive. But for most of the movie, the camera never stops shaking. It's always moving around, desperately trying to keep the people talking in frame, always indecisive who or what to focus on next. It's some of the most nauseating shaky cam we've had in quite a while, and I have no idea why. Maybe like Kim Little, he was given little to no time to set things up, or maybe the second unit wasn't skilled enough or not given enough instruction beforehand, but it just makes watching through this movie all the more painful. You know, given their reputation for their patience and how they can appear still for hours at a time, I think they would have been better off giving the camera to an actual crocodile. Oh, and sometimes the camera will randomly blur. I think it's to hide the more glaring instances of the CGI not gelling well with the live action footage, but it's also an accurate depiction of my eyes trying to keep up with the action. And most of these problems I think can sadly be pinned on Scott Harper. As well as doing the effects work, this is his directorial debut, and the first of only 2 movies he's directed. And yeah. In my opinion, there are 2 different types of directors. Those who work hard to give their work a certain style, something that stands out from the pantheon of other directors and their work in the industry. And those who are hired just to point and read stage directions. Scott is most likely the latter. Now, I'm not blaming him for everything. Between doing the movie's laborious effects work and having to guide the actors and set up each shot within the crunch period allotted by the studio, I'm impressed this guy managed to get this movie done. I would not be surprised if he just sat in the director's chair, his focus on his laptop as he desperately tried to get everything modeled and rendered, shouting action and cut whenever he remembered to. Any actual direction was a luxury. Now, that's purely speculation and me giving him the benefit of the doubt, but I do have to question, why make the overburdened effects artist the director in the first place? And then why do it again 7 months later? And him being distracted may account for why the size of the crocodile is never consistent. Sometimes it's shorter than the lowest tree branches, sometimes it's the size of a highway, and sometimes it's big enough to passively crush a car underneath its foot. Or maybe I'm wrong, and all this time, this was the gritty reboot of Zack's Alligator. If so, way to make the Lyle Lyle Crocodile movie look good by comparison. Speaking of gritty, that's the quality of the Air Force stock footage they'll insert to make up for their lack of an aircraft budget. This is possibly the least convincing stock footage I've ever seen in an Asylum movie. Yes, even more than Pirates of Treasure Island. I will never understand why they peppered a movie shot in widescreen high definition with overly grainy footage that looks like it was filmed in the 80s or 90s. Heck, some shots look like they were originally black and white. Now they tinted and stretched everything to try to hide that these are all from different sources, but when I've seen less obvious stock footage style changes in the amazing bulk, something's gone horribly wrong. I just want to plaster Bela Lugosi over this footage and have him shout, "Pull the string! Pull the string!" The sets? What sets? Everything's filmed outside, save for the Situation Room scenes that look like they were filmed in an abandoned classroom, and some shots of the military with the eggs that look like they were filmed in, I don't know, someone's garage. I guess I am impressed that they were able to film some scenes in downtown Los Angeles. You know, in the middle of the night in some secluded section of the city nobody cared about. But it's a change from the closed sets, dark woods, and middle-of-nowhere motels most of these movies have been shot in, and where most of the budget likely went. Was it worth it? No. No, the answer is no. The music's okay. It's credited to Eliza Swenson, and as usual, I can't tell if it's an original composition or taken from a library or previous Asylum movie. But it's a fast-tempo soundtrack that gives the air of disaster looking right around the corner, so it gets the job done. But then we get to the film's absolute worst aspect. Yes, the plot, the acting, the camera work, the choppy editing, there's something far worse than anything we've already covered. I mean, my god. Supercroc doesn't just get the gold when it comes to horrendous sound and audio balance, it takes the silver, bronze, every participation ribbon, and the half-eaten hot dog one of the judges was eating. For starters, the movie utilizes these credits that kind of imitate old-fashioned counters, where it cycles through each letter and number to spell out each word. And originally, I was impressed with the effect. But every time they show one of these captions, it's accompanied by this obnoxious digital ticking noise. And when I say every time, I mean every single time. And that is just the tip of the toxic landfill iceberg. Literally every flavor of bad editing is present in this movie. We have a lot of ADR work. Most outdoor shots, and even quite a few indoor shots, are clearly dubbed over in post, and most of it isn't synced up at all. Like the dubbing in Freak Show, there's at least a tenth of a second, sometimes more, between someone speaking and hearing what they're saying, so their lips are noticeably moving before or even after they start talking.
Phantom 4, are you getting any of this over?
These things are like 3 feet tall.
And sometimes their lips are moving when they're not talking, and vice versa.
I have an engineering background.
You read Wired magazine. That doesn't make you an expert, Forney.
I don't think I want to see what happens when these things hatch.
Whoa. Wait!
And then there's all the clipping. Some lines have the very beginning or very ending snipped right off, leaving a very unnatural clip in the word.
I'm Fred. What is your marker?
Charlie Alpha Male, I'm approximately 100 yards from target.
Affirmative, Private.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
God damn it! Private Fred, this is Phantom 4. Do you copy?
Huh? Think you could take this thing out alone? You? Don't worry. You'll be safe by us.
It could be from erosion.
Maybe an underground explosion of some kind?
And that's just dialogue. Practically every time they change shots, whatever background noise there was will awkwardly cut as well, usually cutting into the middle of new background noise.
Careful, my dad smokes a corncob pipe that blows bubbles.
All right.
It's not safe here on the ground.
Where were you attacked?
Major, any luck finding the boy?
Doesn't look good, sir. We got Kilo 1 on the ground running recon, approaching the target.
And you know how I complained about the studio using stock screams and shouts unironically in previous movies? Sound bites that are so overused, they're too cringe to even be used as a joke nowadays? Well, you want to hear the worst offender so far? No? Too bad. But if you think the ADR work is bad, the dialogue recorded on location is worse. Many scenes, especially those shot indoors, have dialogue flooded with background noise. So while people are talking, we hear chairs moving, feet tapping, random digital sounds, and, of course, an overbearing echo from how enclosed and claustrophobic the rooms in the interior shots are.
Alpha 233, this is Phantom 4, do you copy? Alpha 233, this is Phantom 4, do you copy? Sir, we lost it again.
What? Disappeared?
Not on the map.
Do you have subterranean imaging?
Wait.
Saying there's a relation to that?
Sir, the mouse is located here, north of Santa Barbara by about 4 miles.
Do you realize how big a cave would have to be?
Exactly. Excuse me, General.
Get on that. I want an amphibious unit available as soon as possible.
And this is yet another movie where the volume of the dialogue is dependent on how close to the microphone the actors are. Meaning the actors could be screaming at the top of their lungs, but we can't hear them because the microphone is too far away.
We're loading them right now. Roger.
Let's go, boys. Copy that.
And when they do use ADR, it clashes horribly with the overly echoey on-set dialogue.
Alpha 2-3, this is Phantom 4. Do you copy?
We've lost contact with Private Forney.
What's happening now? Lieutenant, where are Private Forney's stats?
We need to conduct this at CL7. It's the only facility we have with the capacity for an operation of this scale.
No, you're going in the wrong direction. It's on the southwest end, about 200 yards from the lake.
And of course, because the recording area is so noisy, when characters stop talking, so does the microphone hum and any other background noise from when they were recording.
General, the target is moving.
Speak.
Short shift. He dispersed to different cavities.
A shift in weight?
Dr. Perel.
And to think that only recently I was giving the Hitchhiker flack for this. And sometimes we'll even get scenes where they'll utilize ADR, on-set recordings, and awkward muted silence all in one shot.
Something leaked up to the surface?
Soft sand is very good probability.
But the worst aspect, the absolute biggest embarrassment that catalogs this movie into having the worst sound editing I've probably ever heard in my life, the audio balance is so bad, the music and background noise will drown out every piece of dialogue it's played over. And we're not talking 1 or 2 scenes they didn't get to before they burned this movie to disc and shipped it out. No. A good chunk of this movie has the backing score played so loudly, it's literally impossible to hear anything being said.
Too dangerous down there. Have to drop you off on the inside.
No, it's gonna be good.
Yeah, so will a 100-foot crocodile.
And yet it matched bone structures from the Jurassic.
What kind of bones?
Reptile.
Turn it up! Turn it up!
Now, for what it's worth, the studio did eventually realize that this was a problem. So, for all streaming re-releases, or at least the ones I checked, the background audio has been drastically reduced, allowing us to actually hear what these planks of wood are whining about. They didn't fix any of the other multiple major audio glitches and inconsistencies, but at least they made it possible for me to play some of these scenes for context.
That bite radius, those teeth are at least 8 inches.
Hench, I want you to get one right now. Intel.
Look at that bite radius, those teeth are at least 8 inches.
Hench, I want you to get one right now. Intel.
There's a lot of people down there, aren't you worried?
I don't get paid to worry. That's for more important people to do.
There's a lot of people down there, aren't you worried?
I don't get paid to worry. That's for more important people to do.
And this seems to be a mistake they really want to repent for, since this is one of the most widely streamed Asylum movies I've seen, available on multiple streaming services, most of them for free. Or they care so little about this movie, the cost to license it is whatever pocket lint you have on you at the time. Still, at least now anyone morbidly curious about this movie can check it out and hear everything being said without having to fork over a cent. But if you're one of the poor schmucks that actually bought this movie on DVD, well, that's $2 to $10 you're never getting back. So the movie ends... Actually, no, ends is not the right term. For something to end, it would have to have a beginning and a middle. And as we've learned by this point, that's a luxury most Asylum movies can't afford. So the movie stops in the middle of Los Angeles, as it's revealed that Perez is a crocodile expert. Why? Because she grew up in the swamps of Florida. I was going to challenge this because I thought they were confusing crocs with alligators, but apparently species of crocodiles do live in southern Florida, so I guess they got one fact right. And being a crocodile expert, she knows that a crocodile's weak spot is its unprotected underbelly. Because, you know, we have this giant task force with its own herpetologist expert, and all throughout its miles-long rampage, nobody ever thought to themselves, maybe we should shoot it in the big spot where it's not covered in bulletproof armor. So they find a bit of C4, craft together a bomb, throw it under the croc, and that does the trick. Yeah, it shakes off a direct hit by a nuclear missile, but a tiny explosive pops it like a grape. I don't know, insert your own Death Star joke here. They destroy the remaining eggs, Perez and Lynch are commended for their actions, they go off to have a romantic evening alone because, hey, it's been a few hours, Perez has forgotten all about her original fiancé she saw killed right in front of her, and the egg Dr. Kim Little stole starts to hatch, teasing a sequel that has as much chance of happening as a new Wally Gator animated series. I figure I had to end with something Crocker Gator related. So, I've discovered a new emotion that I can get from watching an Asylum movie. Embarrassment. Oh sure, I also felt bored, angry, insulted, disgusted, and patronized, like most other movies I've featured here. But above all, I just felt embarrassed to have had to watch this. The plot is invisible, the pacing is non-existent, the characters are flatter than roadkill, the villain's motivations are nobler than the heroes we're supposed to root for, the camera is a jerky, unfocused mess, and the monster is so underutilized and fake, it's easy to forget it's the focus of the movie. And the audio? It's the worst I've ever heard. I spent minutes describing just how painful this movie is to listen to. And even then, it's something you have to hear with your own ears to fully understand the unbelievable auditory ineptitude this movie calls sound editing. I can't believe that the movie features all this talent, all these hardworking people that have shown incredible skill on and off camera, and yet the end product is the equivalent of a 10-year-old making a monster movie in their backyard. Except that 10-year-old was given a $200,000 budget. And whatever hand puppet they were originally going to use would have been 1,000,000 times more entertaining than this hunk of digital nothing masquerading as a threat. This is one of those movies that doesn't just fail at being a genre movie, but a movie in general. A movie features scenes you can see and audio you can hear. And I'm sorry, but for a good chunk of its runtime, I didn't recognize either of those traits. It's not even so bad it's good. It's so bad you'll be biting your tongue from the amount of cringe this movie radiates. It is one of the most embarrassing projects I've seen from this studio, and one of the worst. I'm glad the studio realized just how terrible this movie is, and eventually made it available for free, with the audio balance issues fixed. But I'm furious that it charged people money in the first place. And even though you can now watch it for free, I recommend you don't. Treat this movie like it's an actual 50-foot long crocodile and run the other way, screaming and warning everyone you come across to also avoid this wreck. For a film called Supercroc, the biggest croc on display is this crock of shit that calls itself a movie. Well, we've seen one of the Asylum's seconds, in a genre that would later make up a good chunk of their turnout. But next time, we take a look at another of their firsts, in a genre that would also make up a decent portion of their catalog. Let's find out what happens when the Asylum finds religion. Hey there, you've reached the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, please take a second to like, comment, and, if you're so willing, subscribe. It's how my videos get noticed, and it encourages me to keep making them. And if you'd like to be even more incredible, check out my Patreon. It's a measly $1 to be credited at the end of my review videos, and if you'd like to contribute more, well, there are higher tiers and extra rewards. Whatever you decide, stay awesome, keep watching, and I'll see you next time.